All right, you're tuned in to a special episode of the Brown Munde podcast. There's only the two of us here today, myself, Harwinder, and alongside me, Saib. Saib, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Thanks.
So today we're holding this podcast because we've been a bit AWOL for a few months and kind of got busy post-COVID lockdown and just getting back into the swing of work and doing all sorts of other things. But we've been trying to get back on the ball for a while now, while we couldn't get all four of us together at the same time, even though it's virtual. You and I figured we'd jump on and have a talk because something happened recently in the South Asian community that we thought was worth us lamenting and having a chat about in public, right?
Facts, yeah. And obviously you don't want, it's obviously unfortunate what has happened. You don't really want those to be the triggers to encourage us to have conversation. But at the end of the day, I think it's important, and I appreciate us talking about it because I think it's going to be good for me. It's therapy for myself in a way of talking about when stuff like this happens and just getting my thoughts out. But I think it's obviously also turning a negative event into something positive, hopefully for us to just see, assess and see what's happened.
Entirely. And the reason we all set up Brown Monday podcast for ourselves was not to try and jump on the podcast bandwagon that everyone's setting up podcasts and doing videos as YouTubers and vlogs, but because we wanted a space where we would take what we chat about in person and together in our own little group, in our own little circle. We wanted to do that publicly because some of those conversations might help people publicly, but also it would help us tone down how we were saying things because we knew saying them for a public audience. We always said from day one, we're probably not going to tone it down, but it has meant that as a collective, we have to think a little bit more before we chit chat about stuff because it's for a public environment. So for that purpose, exactly, I'd like, completely agree with everything you're saying in the sense that that's why we wanted to talk about this today. And so the incident that you're talking about is a very tragic incident that took place last week. Anyone who hasn't come across it so far, a young man based here in Leeds in the north of England committed suicide last week. And what made it, he was a young, from a Punjabi background, a Sikh background, young Munde, he wore the star, had case. And the reason that it kind of captured everyone's attention, in my opinion, was that it happened in real time. There was a post he made on Instagram which instigated us even knowing this incident took place and everything happened. It wasn't reported to us after the fact by news, but he'd made a post on Instagram, said that he had been suffering from depression for a number of years, and he had sought help before, and he had tried to even commit suicide before, but he had always held back, but he could see no other way out now. He just wanted it all to be done, and he was going to do this. And it happened in real time in the sense that there was still a chance he was still alive when he put this post up. And there was a sudden mad dash by all of his Instagram followers, his friends and family, to find him and chase him down. And people like ourselves shared that message on Instagram when we were alerted to it. And I understand a whole load of his friends in the north of England were literally out in their cars all night looking for him. But sadly, the next morning he was found dead, having committed suicide. And so that's the topic we wanted to talk about, because lots of us were really all captivated by the way that he wrote that Instagram post. So sorry, that was the second thing. First was it was happening in real time, in my opinion. The second was the way he wrote that last post. It was just it was a picture of him, then a bunch of short video clips of him on the last day, I assume, of him doing things with some of his friends. Is him playing golf a little bit, is him just saying something to the camera, and then there's him with one of his friends just walking along. It's all so normal and ordinary and real, and you wouldn't know this guy's about to do this and go through this. And then when he wrote it, like, he didn't write a huge essay, but in such a short space of words and text, he kind of captivated me. When I read it, I was like, I can't believe this guy's gone through this, and this is how he sees the end. I know it sounds strange to say, but to me, Saib, reading that, it was almost like he was going out. I've really got to choose my words carefully. I don't think I am, but to me, it seemed like he was going out very dignified. The way he wrote that post towards the end, it was like he was very, he was being very prim and proper about the way he was going to go out, and this was the end, and don't worry about me, hopefully I'll find some peace on the other side, I just know this is going to be the end. He wasn't, he said, don't remember me negatively, remember, I had good times, this is the only way I can see out, don't think bad about it, all that kind of stuff. And then he was leaving all these little tidbits of information for other people in the same situation, about
that he definitely was like prepared, like he knew what I'm writing. It wasn't emotional, right? You wouldn't come out away. And I think that's what shook me a bit. It was like, obviously it wasn't emotional. It wasn't just, a spare of the moment. You could tell this kid has thought about this. He's really written it with knowing what I'm about to do, even little things where he was like giving the suicide helpline number, saying, oh, people were there for me, they were talking to me, but it just didn't work for me, and this is why I'm doing it. That was like, to me, and there was some bits which really got to me, where like he was talking about a lot of positivity, like you were saying, which then again in my head was like, well, you clearly had a lot of positive stuff going on. Why are you
doing this?
Why are you doing this?
So
there's so much positivity in your post right now about the good times with your friends and family. So what's wrong then? I'm not understanding why you're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, when he said he had that one line that said, I can't stress to you enough the importance of just talk to someone. And he's like, Giza, why are you not doing this yourself? And he'd follow it up with, I tried, I've done that, it hasn't worked. And I was thinking the whole time, well, if I'm someone reading this and I'm going through a similar thing, I'd say, well, it ain't working for me either, bro. If you're going to take this way out, then why can't I? But he was still trying to help other people, saying it's the most important thing you do. Like you said, he shared the suicide helpline number, and clearly he'd gone to the brink before, and he'd thought about it before, he says, and he's been talked out of it before, but this was a time he wasn't going to be talked out of it. It's such a sad state of affairs for his friends, for his family, obviously, as well. And, it's still very raw. For our purposes today, we don't want to dig down deeper on him as a personal case. Really is talking about the whole incident and the thing that rises with it, which is conversation over, really what we're talking about today is like how we understand death in our community, which is something you and I have done our first ever podcast on, was on that topic. Really, that's what we're talking about. But digging down a little deeper, it's going to be us talking about how perhaps young men don't really have spaces to talk, or don't feel that they can't talk openly to one another about their feelings, and particularly feelings of negativity, of depression rising within them. But then also just the idea of our community within the South Asian community, people not wanting to talk about concept, like, things that actually happen, like suicide, and wanting to, just pretend it kind of didn't happen, or sweep it under the carpet, and not really dealing with these problems as they're happening in real time. That's what we wanted to kind of just talk about. I want to make it clear, like, I hope no one watching this thinks we're trying to, off the back of this tragic incident, trying to, get numbers or viewers off of it. That's not the case. Like you said, we were going to talk about this. We're going to talk about it in our group. And we were like, this is stupid. This has happened so publicly. Everyone and their cousin seems to have something to say about this on social. We should put out our comments and our conversations socially. And so hence we're doing this podcast, right? And I think that's a good place to start. Social media has been the place where he got his message out. But it seems to me social media might have been one of the places that caused him the problems in the first place. Or certainly for me, they showed a lot of the problems in the time since then as well.
That's so true, man. Because when I was like going through it, and again, people were making these comments, and again, I don't want to judge anyone, right? Everyone deals with their own way, right? But when you analyze it, and this is why I really was passionate about wanting to talk about it, you see people come out, and almost it does feel a little bit like jumping on the bandwagon. Something like this happens, we all end up saying, I messaged on that thread straight up. I was like, don't do this, there's more to life, try not to end it. But everyone just jumps onto that, is like, reach out, talk to me. But it feels like I've seen that before. There's been other cases where suicide has happened and we reach out and we say, talk to us, right? maybe we've done the same in my friend circle group as well. I'm sure everyone else did that. We all were like, yeah, man, mental health. I'm glad it's become more of an issue. We need to talk about this. Is everyone here for each other? We did that for like that moment. But other than that, I'll be honest, we don't really check in unless something has happened like that. It's like for the week now, everyone's on their mind. Yeah, we're checking in. We got to check in. But outside of that, it's going to be forgotten again, and we don't really check in. So that hit me. And then the other thing was like everyone obviously now all over the place, us included in a way, maybe, are talking about, mental health. It's really important. Men cannot express themselves. Men need to be able, we need to get away from this thinking that men can't share their feelings. But for me, it's more like, actually, if you go back to his post almost, he was expressing to himself, to someone, he had people to check in with, but there's a bigger underlying issue which we don't talk about. Thousands of people are extending their hand, but clearly that's not enough. We need to actually look beneath it. And this is kind of like what I want to talk about, like what's the act? How do we get to that stage that people, despite having someone to talk to, still feel that life's not good enough?
Like there's no other way out for them other than to do that and ultimately take their life. I mean, on the social media front, exactly like you said, I left a comment under it saying, I hope you're found safe and sound. That's all I wrote, because I was reading the other comments thinking, why are half of you jumping on this, like, yo, come speak to me, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of blue tick Instagrammers commenting underneath it as well, which props to them. They don't need to step out and do that, and sharing that this guy's doing that. And who knows, maybe one of them would have been able to speak to him to stop. But in my head, they wouldn't have. It was too late. That's what was clear from his text. Like if they were maybe reading that a little bit more carefully, they would have seen he don't care if you're frigging Kanye West commenting on it now saying, yo, brother, I'm going to DM you my number, call me. It wouldn't have mattered. It was too late for him. In fact, what I saw and thought out of it, and I put a story out straight after it was all like happening, then saying, it's all well and good everyone leaving these comments, and I'm reading them with great interest. There's probably people around you right now who need you to talk to them now.
Yeah.
This kid we can't help anymore and he's gone. But there's other people around you now. So reach out to them. Don't let them go. I'm going to say now, because like some of the people I know will be watching this who it affects, but there's 7 people in my life who've reached out to me at different times who've told me they ain't well and they're not in good places. Just through, because I teach Sikh studies, or I was running Bhangra comps and seen as like, I'm not young, I'm a lot older. So they see like, maybe I could reach out to him, he could help in some way. And they've reached out to me. 7 people said, B, right? That's a lot of people. And I can't lie, there's 2 of them where I ain't helped ever. And I've dropped. I've never checked up on them. I've never called them up and chased them up. That night, I sent them text messages saying, yo, you feeling good? I'm really sorry I ain't reached out to you since you raised that with me. But I just wanted you to know that, like, I'm sorry, like, but I'm here whenever you need it. That's what I sent you when you reached out to me. But I haven't chased you up since then, but I need you to know. Now, the other 5 people I speak to regularly, and I'm not kidding, like these are people who are not necessarily on the brink, but they are seeking professional help. They need that help. They're not just people going through stuff. They're in really bad places. Now, I'm not saying that big myself up, look, I'm doing this. I'm saying, look, I'm saying the opposite. Look, even I dropped the ball on this. I was like, with those 2 people I messaged that, and I was like, shit, it's been like almost a year with one of them. I hadn't spoken to him in a year. And when he reached out to me, that must have been hard for him. I felt like such a prune. Here I am judging these other people on social. I should be doing it myself. So I was like, I could text them, I'm not going to let it drop now. At least once a month, if not more, right? I'm going to check in on all of them just to say, just reminding you, I'm here. You ever need to call, pick up the phone and talk to me. That's what I'm here for. And generally, I do that with a lot of people anyway. Like just through teaching, they know they can speak to me afterwards, send me an email and stuff like that. But I think it's on a different scale. And that's what you're talking about, right? There's people around us where you could probably offer some help and they want it and they need it now and they need you to talk to them. And that's much better for us to do than just to put a post up on social on Thursday night, Friday night, whenever it was, and then forget about it when Sundays come.
Yeah. Yeah. But then even that, I'll be honest, man, for me, that's still, and it's needed, don't get me wrong, like definitely the check-ins are needed, but to me, if I was to use an analogy, it's like it's putting a plaster on something
That's broken.
it's that's not gonna that's just something that's, you know, we're plastering a wound, but that's not gonna heal it. Like I feel like the actual, because then it's gonna keep happening, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Like for me, and this is what I started thinking about, is like, how are we gonna actually get to the root cause of why do people feel that? And I feel like that is where we as a community, that's where we fail, because we don't actually want to talk about that. Why do people feel life isn't enough? Like, and no one wants to have that conversation, because I don't know, it's like either you think you're inviting negativity or you're seen as someone negative, you know, because it's nice, it's just a nice story if everyone talks about success and I want to get more, and you know, that's positive, that's cool, yeah. But for me, really, truthfully, that's actually the problem. That's actually the fuel on the fire, is, oh, you know, all this positivity hype. And that's where social media comes in again. All this, everything's great, everything's amazing. You got to be here, you got to be there. Yeah. And then when it doesn't work out like that, then people end up being depressed. And
I mean, I'd add to that, like, we totally live in a consumerist society that has lost sight of what we don't ask. The most important questions is what you're saying. We don't ask, what's life all about? What are you here for? Why do you think that escaping from it in a way where you're the one taking control, that it's not good enough just being here and going through the struggles and the strifes and or the joys and the celebrations? You know, some people feel depressed when everyone else looking at them from the outside. Think of like major celebrities who commit suicide, where everyone looks at them like, you got so much money, you got so much talent, you got so much laudation by the public who revere you and love you. How could you go through this and take an overdose and, you know, end it all? Why would you do that? Some people, not just through struggles and strifes and tribulations, do it, but some people do it through joy and celebrations. They can't handle the pressure or everything that comes with it. And that's totally what you're talking about. We as a society, not just the South Asian community, although we're very focused a bit that we're going to look at now, as you know, global society, people have stopped asking the question, what are we doing here? Why are we even here? What should be enough for me? What am I trying to gain out of being here? And like you said, all the conversations relate around positivity. Look, you know, it's about money, it's this, that, and the other. And it's not about, well, what does it actually mean to be alive? And I'll go way too religious with this stuff, but that's what some people like always say to me when I talk about it. But what does it actually mean to die? Because for this guy and loads of other people who commit suicide, they think death's a way out now. Whereas from my, you know, background and our Gurmat teachings, like, death is not a way out. It's just another stepping stone to another. You're going to go back on the rigmarole, back you come into life again. You think that's going to be any better? It's going to have the same problems and the same steps. And like you said, that's the underlying bit. That's the bit you got to work out and fix. Same problems. You're still here going round the hamster wheel, right? That's it. You're not going to get out of it.
Yeah, it's facts. And it's not judgment either. Like, you know, like I know, not me personally, but extended, I know where suicide has happened, right? And I try to have this conversation with people who are affected by those suicides. And I you know, and you can get told that, you know, which I totally respect. You don't know. It's easy for me to make these comments, right? I don't know what it feels like when people are going through that emotion. And I totally respect that, right? I'll be honest. I'm blessed in a way that I haven't felt, you know, I do get depressed, don't get me wrong. I have my moments of like feeling down, but touch wood, I haven't felt suicidal, right? So I cannot say, okay, I cannot relate or understand how someone feels that's going through that, right? But what I can say is I can look at that person and I can reason why they may feel that way. And this is what I'm trying to get at. I'm not denying anyone's feelings, right? When someone feels that down, 100% that's valid, right? They're feeling the way they're feeling, but there's a reason why they feel that way. And it's hard when someone's already at that stage to change them. I do believe it's hard because we're conditioned a certain way, right? And to change someone that's conditioned a certain way is 10 times harder than starting where someone is not touched by those thoughts and processes. So like, yeah, with our kids, for example, that's where I feel like that's where the change is going to come, making them realize this is the thinking you need to have, so that when you're later on, you are conditioned to fight against these emotions that are going to come to you. Whereas because we haven't had that training, 20 years of going through that is, you know, it's going to be hard for me to change, and I'm going to feel depressed and suicidal because I'm trained to think like that almost.
For real, we should probably, like, just for reference purposes, I should say, we both appreciate and understand there's a medical condition known as depression, that you have to fulfill a certain amount of criteria to suffer depression. And then there's the general colloquial term we all use, that, oh, I feel depressed and something like that. They're two distinct things, right? We appreciate that. And sometimes some of the people, though, who commit suicide, and we're not talking about this incident from last week, but some individuals who commit suicide don't necessarily meet all of the criteria to be medically depressed. Sometimes they can just push themselves into a corner, see no way out, and just go down that route because they think there might be something out. It's interesting you say, like, you know, about people not necessarily having something like that happen to them personally or in their family. I think one of the reasons why I think the way I think about life and death and how, you know, asking these important questions is because when I was 8 years old, my family went through pretty much one whole year non-stop of grieving, because there were 4 people all on my maternal side of the family who all died within a few months of each other. Basically, it was 8 months between the first death and the 4th death. And it was my nana who died first, mother's pua who died last. And then in between that, my mother's chacha, Saka Chacha, who was also her Saka Masar, he died. But the second death was the one that they never really got over. And I had to experience myself, which was my Saka Mama, mum's eldest brother. And he committed suicide. So he was a farmer suicide from Punjab, 1988, peak of, like, you know, a lot of this stuff kicking off and starting to happen. Now, he wasn't a 100% farmer suicide. There were some other things that took place that led him down that dark road where he saw no other way out, but he just wanted to commit suicide. What was interesting for me throughout that whole time period was, I mean, I was a little kid, but it was like preparing me and my siblings for how we appreciate death and how these things work. And I'd never met him before. I went to Punjab for the first time 3 years after that. But that whole first trip we were there, literally, it was like everything that was going on was colored around his death, his suicide. And so, like, you know, the minute we land there, we get to the bend. My mum hadn't been there for 13 years. She'd been in England, then working all that time. And literally when she landed, I kid you not, it was like 6-7 hours of nonstop crying. And we're like little kids watching this all and like trying not to cry ourselves, because you cry because you see mum crying and everyone else crying, my nanny crying and stuff like that. But then at the same time, you were kind of like, this is great. I'm in Punjab, I'm in my homeland. I want to enjoy it. But you weren't kind of able to. And the problem was, for the 3 weeks we were there, different relatives would come to see us. And every single one of them, when they got there, the first hour was just crying, because they were crying to do absorbs for my nana and mum's chacha and pua, as well as my mama and his death. And his was the one that obviously colored it most. The others were all elderly. He's like, you know, he was a strong man. He was in the army, in the Indian army for a long time, until the 70s. He was a Singh. He wasn't a Amritari, but like he was into his Sikhi, recited Bani a lot. And like, you know, he was a strong man. And so for a lot of people, they had trouble, like, how does a strong man get through this? So what's now become fashionable for people to say, like, what does it mean to be a strong man? Actually, the strongest men harbor sometimes the most sensitive stuff because they can't get it out. But I, as a young age, started seeing that prior to the fashion. It don't matter how tall, he was a real tall man, he was built like an ox, you know, in the army, very different way of thinking, you know, all that kind of stuff. That meant shit to me, because I started realizing then, it don't matter if you haven't got devices in your life, if you haven't got places that help you deal with everything that's going on, it don't matter. When something hits you, you have no idea what's going to hit you. You're going to deal with it badly. And I think that really shaped my life, certainly going forward. But for that reason, like what you said, it does become a hugely sensitive topic. We're fortunate in our house, we talk about it a lot. But I'm not going to lie, you know, my mum literally starts crying the second we start talking about it. like you can see her lip starts quivering, then I start crying. And I'm sitting there. Sometimes we'll have a full Barney about it because I'm talking about it, and I'll have a strong viewpoint about something related to it. And she will then, like, finger point will come out and she'll say, you can't say that about my brother, you can't do this. I'm like, well, we got to, because otherwise how are we going to discuss this? We've got to work out, like, what did Paul Mama do? Like, why did he think that was the only way out? That ain't from our Dharam point of view a good thing that he did. And we don't believe, like the Gore do and the rest of the world does, in rest in peace. He ain't resting in peace. When he died, the instant he died, whenever it was, he went through to a next life. And he was going to get judged for everything he did in that life, including that suicide. But he's now going to go on to the next life. The problems that he took with him when he died, that he thought he was leaving behind, we're talking about those underlying problems are going to be carried on with him to the next life. Because those problems are really what you're saying, I hope, we're on the same page. It's talking about something that's deep-rooted in your consciousness.
Yeah.
That's it, right? So what are those problems that we're talking about? Maybe that would help, like, anyone watching this who wants to get a feel of what we're talking about for ourselves. But what do we think are the underlying problems that society faces, that particularly young men, it's apparently, one of the top 5 causes of death for all men, like under a certain age. Exactly. But it's something ridiculous, like 15 to 25-year-old males, suicide is like the #1 cause of death or something stupid like that. I can't remember what it is, #1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but it's really high. And so what are these underlying causes we're talking about?
Me, when your expectation, you're growing up with a level of expectation of what your life is going to be like, right? This is what it's meant to be like. And you hear all these stories, right? And if your life doesn't meet those expectations, that's when you feel something's wrong, right? But the actual reality is, reality doesn't always meet our expectations. And I think that, like, for me personally, that's where that really clicked, where I understand, where anything I ever do, I try to keep my expectations really low. And you can have hope, don't get me wrong, like, I wish something happens, but when it doesn't happen, and like you're saying, it does, there's no qualm. You know more about this sort of stuff than I do by far, but it does come down to spirituality or religion to a certain extent. But that's the mechanism that helps you to understand this stuff, right? And that's what helps me, is then taking those concepts, which I try to understand, is like, hukum, if I can have expectations, not expectations, sorry, hope of things working out a certain way. There's no harm in that, right? I can wish, I want to be the biggest Bhangra class out there in the UK or whatever, right? I can have that hope. But if it doesn't happen, if I'm just going to stay in Langley on a Wednesday, then that's hukum. Then I'm just going to take it for what it is. I'm not going to be upset about it. But I'm allowed to, everyone should be allowed to have dreams, of course. But you need to be able to understand that if it doesn't work, it's part of the higher divine plan, hukum, which basically, it works out that way, and that's reality.
Yeah, totally. All right, we're definitely singing on the same hymn sheet now. But like, I mean, because we didn't talk about the specifics of what we're going to talk about today at all, right? This is us actually lamenting and talking about it. And although we've done a podcast about life and death before, we didn't go into these nitty-gritty stuff. Really, I'm totally on board everything you said. That's what it is. It's expectations. And man, salute to you, salam to your thinking, because having low expectations for me has been one of the hardest things to get across in life. That's from a Dharmi point of view, like every sant ever going has always said, have 0 expectations and your life's phenomenal, right? Again, like you said, that doesn't mean you don't have dreams, you don't have ambitions, but expectation is different to that. An expectation is, I'm going to put in this and this is going to happen. And that's not a good way to live, because that ain't always the way life goes. You can put all of your heart, soul, and energy and time and money and everything into a business. Hey, if the market conditions ain't working, then it ain't going to end up where you want it to, right? There's so much outside of your control. And for that reason, you should have 0 expectations. So I'm totally in agreement with you on that. That's the problem. But like I said, in practice, having low expectations or having no expectations is a hard thing to do. We kind of live a very logical or rational life. And I think that's the problem. You try and live by reason And so it's like, well, it stands to reason. If I do this, this should come out. That's an expectation. And you got to start learning we're not the only factors in the equation. There's so much else going on. So your example of the Bhangra practice like sessions, the classes, that is a great example. You're running a great class. You're serving so many people week after week on BFit Bhangra, and like when I've seen the videos and I see, wow, like there's so many people coming out. I didn't even know you were promoting it again after lockdown, right? And there was so many students coming to it. Like if you might have, oh, there should be 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 classes, then great if it happens and you're trying and you try and franchise it out, you set up other things and that. But if it doesn't pan out, it's the best attitude to have. Well, it's not meant to be right now. Maybe it's holding me back because that would be too much overcommitment, which means I lose the, if you can't think this way, then you're going to be lost. Like maybe it's right that you don't overreach yet, because you're going to lose your core audience that exists right now that comes to you every week in Langley, right? And you're then not serving the people you started out with in the first place. So you overreach, you don't gain anything there, and you actually lose the people you were helping over here. Maybe that's why, like you said, it's all hookum. Everything's part of a divine design. I think that everything that happens is meant to steer you along this journey. Maybe this lifetime, where you're known as Sahib and you run BFit Bhangra classes and you're a top guy to boot, and you're on the Brown Munde podcast, maybe this lifetime isn't the one where you're supposed to become somebody who's a little bit more world-renowned and helping thousands of people. Maybe it's only supposed to be the scores or hundreds of people that are exposed to you in the environments that you're at, right? Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. That's the bit we've got to get our heads around. Everything doesn't have to happen, and the be all and end all doesn't have to happen in this one. It's okay to feel like shit sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's facing it as well. Facing those negative thoughts, it's okay to do that, and putting yourself, I don't know, this is how I see it anyway. Like, I'll be really honest. So like I was saying earlier, I haven't had genuine suicidal thoughts, yeah? I'll put this out there. But I'm going to put a but in there. I have imagined myself, imagine if I did that, what effect does it have on my problems? What effect does it have on the people around me? Imagining if I did that, would that be a solution? I definitely have done that. I'll be honest. You know me, I love going for long walks, right? So when I'm out there going through like Windsor and I'm walking across the river and the bridge, I'm random. I'll just have these thoughts, right? I'm talking to myself. Maybe it's because I'm my only child, but I'm happy to talk to myself. And I have this conversation and like, Sahib, imagine like, you know, things are bad, you're really at a point and you did that. What would that actually do? Would your problems be gone? Or what effect would it have on my wife? Or what effect would it have on my family? And then that's when I'm actually thinking about it. It doesn't, if anything, has more doc for them. Or right. You see what I mean? So it kind of almost cements that whole idea of that's not the way to go. If you have a problem, you've got to face it head on and don't have the expectation. That's more of a solution than me jumping off here now, for example.
Yeah. So I've heard, I mean, look, you're not the only person who talks to himself. It's not an only child thing, although maybe it might be a little bit more encouraged when you're in that environment, right? My daughter's an only child, and I hear her talking to herself all the time, because if she ain't got a playmate, then she's playing, and me and my wife ain't there, or one of our relatives ain't there. She's talking to herself while she's playing. I've got no problem with that. But me growing up, I talk to myself all the time. I still talk to myself all the time, right? And I usually say to myself, well, if you want to have an intellectual highbrow conversation, who better than to have it with than with yourself, because of the high valuation you place on yourself. But it's true, because nobody knows yourself better than you do. So why not have that conversation with yourself? It's not egotistical. It's like saying, well, when you have a conversation with someone else, they don't know it literally like you know yourself. So why not do it that way, right? But I think it would be interesting to know is when you have that conversation with yourself and you're talking about these things, what is it inside you that makes you, do you think, anyway, you can't say for sure, but what is it inside you that made you think a little bit more empathetically? Like what you said, there's mechanisms in place, and religion gives you that mechanism. But even if it wasn't religion, what mechanism is it that makes you think of the bigger picture? Because ultimately that's what's happening when you're thinking of other family and you're thinking of, ultimately, this isn't going to help me. what is that mechanism that makes you stop with doing? Because I could see someone listening to us now sitting there and screaming and being like, it's all well and good for you saying that, but if you're in the state of depression, you can't see anything else, and you can't see beyond self, and this is the only way out. How would you stop yourself having those thoughts and going somewhere else? I'm more interested in us talking maybe a bit about that mechanism. What is that mechanism that gets you to, you know, say, nah, look, it's better that I'm still here and I face this and I face it head on and deal with it. And actually, like, almost at one level, one of the things I do is I get I gotta say it this way, I get off on strife. Like, my dad sometimes has a bad go at me. He's like, "Tu chonda hi kutte khani hoye." And I'm like, no, I don't want there to be fights and arguments. But when it happens, I deal with it in a way where I'm like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I'm gonna learn something now. Because I'm gonna see what it's like for me or the people around me in a not nice situation. What would they be like in a situation of conflict? So what's the mechanism you do or you have around you rather that makes you think of the bigger picture, makes you tell yourself, no, that's not a good way to be. I can't allow this to swallow me up. What kind of mechanism, what kind of devices, what is there around you that helps you deal with that?
Yeah.
Or has helped you evolve to deal with that? That's a better way, probably.
100%. It's been like evolving to start thinking like that. I think I don't. So I'm in a place where I can almost do it independently now. But the devices that I have is literally, goes back to, again, people having people around. Like, my dad's been a big influence, to be honest, and touch wood, he's kind of brought me up in ways of encourage me to think of, telling me, "Dok daru sukh rog paya." He always will say that to me, like, always. Dok
daru sukh rog paya.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, always will say to me, "Doc, don't worry about it. Doc, get up, keep going. It's fine. It's fine." But it's those little reminders, when you think about that, they help you. And then you grow up and having stories, right? And you go out to different classes. I'll be honest, Sikh studies class been a help for that, right? Because you cover those stories of examples of people having gone through serious difficult times, way more difficult than what we're going through right now, right? And facing them with positivity. So then you see that, you start reading about it. So I think it's like, lots of people were there was a high publicity about the Udham Singh film, for example, right? That's another thing that people could use that to see, when you have those stories, to use that as someone, who goes through some serious struggle, but comes back with a high spirit. And it's that, I feel like, is the mechanism for me, is those examples, and then trying to, again, they help me to lower my expectation and be like, it could be a lot worse. Come on, you can do it, kind of thing.
I know people don't like, it's not really very fashionable to say this kind of stuff now, but people, like, for me, that's definitely the same thing too, was when you looked at Dharam, or you look at the history of, it doesn't even have to be from a Dharmic point of view, just look at history and think of how many people went through so much stuff. Or even in current affairs, there's always someone who's worse off than you. And if you think about that, I think it puts your own life a little bit more into context. Start realizing it ain't a big deal, ain't the worst thing. And my device is definitely the Ardas. Every day you read the Ardas and you're just reminded of, this is the bigger picture. Get the bigger picture in your head. This is one, I mean, I bang on about it all the time. People are probably bored of hearing about it. I know you might be, but it's true. Like, we don't rest in peace when we die. I don't believe that anyway. If someone wants to believe that, that's up to them. But it's not my belief system. It's not my culture. So that's another one. Not going too much back on the social media, but I saw, as soon as this Munde Deep died, like, or he's even, it was announced that he had been successful in committing suicide. It became like, RIP, rest in peace, RIP. I hope you find peace. And from my point of view, when I see Sikhs posting stuff like that, I'm like, wow, are you that, like, bereft of knowledge about our Dharam? What do you mean find peace? If you didn't find peace while you're alive, you're not going to find it when you die. That's not our Dharam.
That's the confusion, though, because even, and that's the last point, I don't want to make it about him per se, it's a bigger topic, right? But I know when he did make the post, he wrote he tagged himself as Better Place.
Yeah.
So that even shows you also, obviously from Sikh background, but his thinking was, it's a better place.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then it goes back to one of the comedians, it was, I think, Ricky Gervais made, I might be wrong, but I think it was him, where he makes the point to someone and it's like, well, if after death you go to heaven and that's the way you think about it, to a better place, doesn't everyone just kill themselves?
Yeah. If you're gonna go to the better place afterwards, why
don't you just go and kill yourself?
Yeah.
And the person didn't really know what to say, because it's true. Because he was trying to say, you know, you got to live a good life, and then after death, that's the real heaven. That's when you're in the best place. Like, well, what are you doing? Just go kill yourself. And it's that. And then with, like, I don't know, as a Punjabi community or Sikh community, we're fortunate that we have something that can actually not make us think like that, but we choose, again, Western consumerist influences just make us think this way. But this is the problem, actually. To think this way, to me, is the problem.
I think throw on to Western society, consumerism. I'd throw in also, like, you know, this whole imperialism that took it around the world is a problem. But that arose at a time of, like, the Enlightenment, and everything became about rationality and reason and logic. So, you know, when you make life so formulaic, that's where I perceive so many problems appear. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, that the West or that, you know, Enlightenment didn't give us many benefits. They did, of course they did. But it's like they caused just as many problems too. And those problems were resolved by people living in a dharmic state. Now, that doesn't mean in Dharam there's not people who still go down that route. Like I said, you know, Masaka Mama he was, and he was reading Nithanim every day, right up until towards the end, he was still doing that. But he just couldn't get his head around it. At some point, people just lose sight. And it goes to show for me, like, that's not actually what Dharam is. Sometimes dressing the form, just blindly reading, is not going to help you. And so that's where I understand where modern day professionals say things like just pointing someone from a Sikh point of view, for example, who's in that state of mind, saying, look, read Bani. They're right when they say just saying that doesn't fix their problem. Actually hand-holding and guiding them through it. Like you said, you know, your dad's a big influence on you and said that, explained to you this line of the Reras that we read that makes it clear that actually Dok is the antidote to the way that life is, and actually Sukh and comfortability in this existence is actually one of the diseases you've got, because it doesn't help you evolve. It doesn't help the consciousness realize there's more than this. There's somewhere better I can get to. I can get to a state of Anand. And the way to get to it is through multiple lifetimes of graft, going through different experiences, different ways of dealing with stuff, and always trying to overcome. That's the benefit, right? Like that's the hard work we're going to do, try and overcome. I don't think this is a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. Sadly, we might have this conversation again 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But for the pair of us, I reckon it's probably just having this conversation helps a bit. But there's got to be other things that we take out of this situation. For me, one is that my whole decision to stop consuming social media, although I post on Instagram alone, still a bit for my business and the charity I help volunteer for, not following people has really helped me, because I'm not exposed to call it what it is, but I'm not exposed to people's bullshit every day. And there's probably a lot of benefits I lose, because there's some people who don't post bullshit, probably a lot of people who post really good stuff, but I'm really not exposed to the crap every single day. I mean, like that poor kid's like just reading that social media post. We won't keep going on about it, but every time I saw those RIPs, I literally want to bang my head against the wall. When I say from Sikh people, oh, I hope you find peace now. Saya, do you even go to the Gurdwara at all, at any level? Do you listen at any level? Fine, you didn't understand what the Kathawajika tells you at the Gurdwara, or what a Granthi told you, or what you learned in a Gurmat camp. Friggin' watch some basics of Sikhi videos, for God's sake. Watch something. There's like 50 billion areas to get this. That concept of you're going to find peace in death is so alien to us. So me avoiding social media, it's a decent price to pay that I don't know, sometimes know what's going on. I don't know what people I actually like and care about are up to. It's a small price to pay when it means you don't have to expose yourself to stuff that otherwise would take me off of my track to try and evolve and build my consciousness in this life. So that's a benefit for me. I don't know about you, what else you take out of this whole thing. And seems a bit self-centered, but what else are we supposed to do but take some learning for ourselves out of this, right? Like, I don't know what else you take out of it.
100% that. And for me, it starts small. Like, and also this point is probably maybe where I'm wrong, but I've tried in the past where you try to have these conversations where, like I was saying earlier to you, it's not just people, we don't just think the way we do overnight, right? It's years of conditioning. Those people who write RIP, I'm not saying that they're bad people, right? They just don't know. No, and then you're not saying that either. I'm just saying they think they're doing the right thing, right? But they're conditioned over years of not paying attention to the Godbara and listening to other stories more so in the culture that they're around, right? That's how they think. To change that, you can try, but it's really, really hard. People are set in their ways. So I kind of I try it with the closest around me still to make that change, because I don't think you can do it on a large scale where like every conversation or every friends group, you know. I'll be honest, I do it. I have these conversations with my parents, with my wife, and probably with her siblings. Right. That's my focus group, if you want to put it that way. Everyone else, I've kind of tried not. I don't really have those conversations anymore. But I feel in the future, when I do have children, hopefully, then that will be the group that you really want to ground up, start, so they don't even get into that conditioning from the other things. That's where I personally see the real change. So that's why I'm having the conversations with my wife, because obviously she's going to be a key person helping me with the raising of a child, right? And getting that thing. I'm having the conversation with her siblings, because when they have kids, hopefully that will then be brought up into them, and then it will obviously, you know, but making the change now within people who are already conditioned for 20, 30 years of this is how I see the world, it's hard to change that. I think it's more effort than what you're going to get back. You can use your energy better in other places. That's what I honestly sort of learned from the whole thing.
I think I've got to take some learning from you doing that as well. I think sometimes I spend way too much of my time trying to focus on a wider circle, way wide, just through the classes I teach, through the audience we've got at Nojwani and the people I kind of speak to on a regular basis through the Nojwani and mentorship and stuff like that. I think I overstretch. I try and stretch too far for sure. And it's probably better just to focus a little bit more at home. I think one other learning that I maybe expressed to you is that as a father of a 7-year-old now as well, one of the things I started learning very, very quickly was it doesn't matter how much you try and put into a kid from home, and you're doing the right thing. You know, you settle as a couple, you know what you're putting in, but as the wider family, parents, siblings, you know, you try and do the best you can with that. But ultimately, any child growing up, their number one space of conditioning comes from the friend circle they get. And you have no control over that, would you believe it, my friend? Because her friend circle is the people at the clubs she goes to and the school she's in. And I had no choice over which kids were in that school. I have a choice over which school I send her to. But whenever if I go to a school, I can't go and interview all the other parents and their kids to see what they're going to be like before they get there. And that's one of the things I realized when I see some stuff I don't like in Gulab. One of the things that comes back to me is, where'd you pick that up? And I slowly realized, picked that up from this kid that she's hanging out with. It's like, damn, how do I stop you from doing that? If I say, once she's 7, you can't say, stop talking to that kid. You ain't going to do it. But even when she gets to 15, 16, like, stop hanging out with that kid. I don't know about you, but when my parents told me to stop hanging out with a kid, the first thing I did was hang out with that kid. Like, why are they telling me not to? What am I going to learn from this kid that they are scared of? And that wasn't me being a dick. I was a good little boy, like do whatever my mummy and daddy tell me. But even then, I was always intrigued a little bit. What are they so afraid of? I'll be able to work it out. It's all right. And so I was like learning more and more. All you can do is do the best you can by giving a foundation and a grounding. if it works, it works. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. What are you going to do about it? You can't let that define you and the journey you're on. And again, I know it comes across as very self-centered, but ultimately, when I die, I'm going to be held to a standard that I gave myself. Like in my brain, I know what's right and wrong. I'm going to be held accountable to that standard. I'm not going to be held accountable to an objective standard that the rest of society has, because society's standard might be here and my standards might be here, or my standards might be here. Either way, I'm going to be held accountable to my standard, and I can't be defined by what my kid did or what my spouse did or my parents did or my siblings do or my friends do. It's got to be what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. And so I think I always end up saying, try and do the best you can by your kids. And like you said, your focus group, try and do the best you can. But again, goes back to that original thing, no expectation.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. I was just about to say, yeah, exactly. So for me, that would be the thing. You would try that, you try what you can, but then there's no expectation behind it, you know, because you understand that if it doesn't work out that way, it doesn't work out that way.
I think if we, as a community, maybe from a Punjabi Sikh community, we now have more and more spaces for young men to go in and speak out. Old men too, middle-aged men and females. Everyone needs their spaces. But in this particular zone, because of what we're discussing, let's just stick with young men. I think there's more and more spaces to go, but maybe this would be a nice space for us to close up on, wrap up. But what you reckon? I mean, I've got my own views on this. I'll share them, then you say what you think. But I think we actually have loads of spaces for young men to now go to and speak and express themselves. I think a lot of what's missing is what you've highlighted today. Them talking about it doesn't actually highlight how to fix that underlying problem, which is the expectation that society has on what you're supposed to achieve and what you're supposed to do. First questions people have, you know, even in our community and society today, is about what money you're earning, what car you're driving, what kind of house you live in. Do you have multiple houses that you rent out? Great side hustle. It's all consumer based. And then moreover than that, how do we award people in our community? How do we reward them? And the people think about it like, you know, that first example is really obvious. Like, you know, I don't earn much money at all. My income is minuscule. And I don't own a car. I walk and bus and train everywhere. And I know people laugh at me. Very few people got the balls to do it to my face, but loads of people laugh. I'm like, I'm a member of the Green Party. I got to back what I believe in. I don't want to add another car to the road when I can't afford it anyway. Can't really afford it. I'm putting all my money into my daughter's education. So I don't want a car for that reason as well. I'll be overstretching. I don't want it. I know that's my standard. So I don't care that the other people are doing it. So, but that's a good example. That's a stark one. We all see that. You know, if you could bowl up in a trapped up car, some wedding, some uncle says to you, "Ah, socha karla, दूजा car खरीद सकता, side hustle कर ला, फिर तेरी बढ़िया car होगी." सालिया, did I ask you? I'm really proud of my crap car, right? People think like that. We do that. But the second example, I don't think we talk about so much, is how do we as a community reward people? And all of our rewards, like if you think of some of these directories and awards shows and things that happen, they don't reward excellence. They reward financial accumulation. So the people, for example, like in these lists, there's this stupid list, the Sikh 100 comes out, most powerful Sikh 100 of influence. It's not a Sikh 100 powerful, influential people. Otherwise, the advisors to half of the Shiromani Akali Dal should be in that list. They're not in that list because these people don't go and find out who those people are. And they don't know their names because they're not well off. But the advisor to Prakash Badal should be the number 2 on that list. Prakash Badal should be number 1, right? But that guy's name doesn't even, there's actually 3 advisors to Badal. Their names aren't even in the 100. All the names in the 100 are people who are millionaires. If you own, like I remember the ones that Sikhs go nuts about, people who own hotel chains. There's this Sikh family who owns some of the Edwardian hotels, things like that. There's another Sikh family who owns another chain of hotels. I can't remember which. Then there's the family that owns Vita, the vitamin company thing.
Yeah.
Visa, who's on Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
All of those, right? They get rewarded by our society. You turn up to a gurdwara, put a sarop around them, look, gurdwara, give him a sarop, give him 10 minutes on stage. Some pola banda comes up, you or me, right? Chal, I get stage time. Let's just pick on you. But look at what you said earlier. And I said, like, having zero expectation is santpuna thinking. You're not even looking for stage time or reward. But as a committee would look at you, you get no accreditation, you get nothing or what you resemble, right? But if you suddenly bowled up in a Bentley and they knew you're worth a few million, you'd get a sropa and said, "But you kuch bolna chaਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ stage." So like that's how our society rewards people, and I think that's a huge part of this problem, because anyone who's younger looking at it thinks, "I've got to have a lot of money in order to be rewarded by our society. I've got to live up to, I've got to have this many followers, I've got to sell this many records or be in this many films." Do you know what I mean? It takes away from that dream, like you said, of maybe what you want to do, and takes you down the road of expectation.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to close. I don't think I've got much to add to that, to be honest, because I agree with that. The only other thing I would probably say is inward looking perspective. People should just try, and it's obviously like you just start small. You don't want that to be an added pressure for anyone, right? To be Santpona level 100 or whatever, but just start small, have conversations. And I think being open in those general forums, whether even if it's your friend, just have the conversation about expectation and reality. And we'll probably find a lot of us are feeling that. And then when you realize, this is one thing I've learned, is when I realized then you start actually thinking, you know what, the grass actually isn't greener. It just takes a little bit of honesty, having an environment where people can actually talk openly rather than everyone putting on their shakti out in this male bravado of I'm the top dog. Create an environment where actually people are able to be honest and say, maybe like, you know, I'm done. Then it's cool, because then you see like, okay, you know what, this is fine. If I'm going through some hardship, and that's actually one thing I would say. I watched it, and this is where social media can be great. On Instagram, I saw a video, and I think it was Tom Hanks, and he got it from somewhere else, saying something like the sentence is, "This also shall pass," and that really stuck with me. Any hardship you go through is time. This will pass, right? So
yeah, for sure. You do
hard things. It will
it's
pass.
phenomenal. Most people don't realize that everything passes with time. Like you break, like someone breaks up as a couple. You know, it feels like the end of the world. But guess what? Time will pass. You'll feel better. In this,
or something's great. It goes the other way. Oh, if you're having a great run, that will also pass, and then you're like,
yeah. Was it in football? We were taught that from an early age. You're only as good as your last game. Don't matter if you won the World Cup 2 games ago. Last game you lost 4-0, first game of the season. No one gives a damn that you won the World Cup now. You just got battered 4-0. So yeah, it's definitely a point. On that note, thanks very much for like the conversation between us today, Sant Sebi. And this is me. I was joking when I said it, and you know that. Well, I wasn't joking. I didn't say you're Sant, but I'm saying that's Sant-like thinking, and we got to fake it until we make it. We got to try and adopt that thinking in order to make it to that place, right? But you're right. Small steps. That's all we got to do. The small steps towards getting to a zero expectation place is an important part. Having these conversations regularly, which I think we will now do from Brown Munde podcast. So make sure everyone watching subscribes, whichever format you're listening to this on, whichever podcast aggregator or mode. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe. Make sure you carry on listening. Myself, Sahib, VJ, Dav, who weren't here today, and then Satbir, who's always like
all times.
AWOL of all podcasts. We're going to be doing this on the regular, no matter which ones of us come together to put the podcast on. Because we feel if we want to take anything out of the incident last week, it's that we were at the very least giving ourselves a public space in which to have a conversation, maybe share our thinking, whether you like it or dislike it, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, whatever it is, we're putting our conversation out there to share our thoughts and our feelings. As you said, introspection is the real important thing we want to have. Introspection followed on by reflection and empathy, thinking about the bigger picture, what's going on is a big part of that. Then we come together, have discourse like this. I think it's the best way forward and try and help resolve some of these issues. So with that in mind, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Brown Munde podcast. Fateh out.
Take it easy, everyone.